It's mid-July. It's Arts Fest time here in State College, which means we've just finished the 9th hole. We're in the home stretch towards the season.
Can't wait. It's a couple weeks till football season. There's expectations. There's a lot going on, and it should be a fun time.
Jay and I have bid for that jacket. We'll come back. Blue White Pulse is next. And welcome to the July edition of Blue White Pulse. Steve Jones, Jay Paterno's down there, and joining us for the first time, Sean Fitz, who does a great job with 24/7 Sports. Sean, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks. It's my first time. I can't wait to talk a little football with you guys.
Yeah, it's a great time to do it. As Jay mentioned, we're making the turn to the back nine here of the off season as we get finally, training camp is on the horizon. We talked offense last month. We're going to talk some defense this month. So, as the countdown continues, what are a couple things that are on your checklist as we head into this training camp?
Well, there's some key guys to replace, no doubt. Brandon Bell, he made all your plays last year. I mean, he was just everywhere on the field, and when he was out, it was a big deal. So you got a couple linebackers to break in. Garrett Sickles was phenomenal last year at defensive end, as well as Evan Schwann. So a couple new spots and new faces to break in over the next couple of weeks.
Jay, let's take a look at the numbers from 2015 to 2016 on the breakdown there. When you look at Penn State defensively, to make the next step forward, what needs to happen?
Well, I think you want to get the rushing yards down. I mean, 151 yards a game rushing is a lot of yardage to give up. But I think the one thing you got to really give this defense credit last year was the second half. They averaged 7 points less in the second half than they did in the first half. And if you look at the big games that they won, the defense made some great adjustments and great plays in the second half. I mean, you go to the Wisconsin game, you go to the Ohio State game, you go to the Minnesota game. If they don't play the way they do in the second half of those games, Penn State's a 7-5 team again. Right. So that was probably one of the biggest things, and I don't think they get enough credit for that.
And that's something that's important because we've talked about, wow, look at what the offense did scoring-wise in the second half. Absolutely true. But you can't win it unless the defense then also does the same thing for their part, Sean.
Absolutely, and I think the big thing to look at was how many plays they played last year. They were on the field a lot. With Penn State scoring as much as they did and as quickly as they did, they had to account for a lot of that, and you see that in the passing yards. You'd like to see them tighten up the run game as well. The linebacker injuries obviously had something to do with that, but yeah, they've got a lot of work to do to sort of tighten things up.
You know, what's interesting is that, let's talk about third down for a moment. On third down, the Penn State defense actually faced 66 more third down plays than the offense had to produce. I mean, that's a really different stat.
Well, I think part of that is the Penn State offense didn't make a lot of third downs, so they didn't give themselves more third down opportunities.
Right, and they did a lot on first and second down,
Exactly right. Did a lot of first and second down. And you know, the thing that people don't realize is they talk about Penn State's offense last year. Penn State's offense, total offense, is 49th in the country. Yeah. The defense was 37th. Now, when you look at the defenses that they played and where they ranked for the offense, much higher. The average offensive rank of the teams that Penn State played was in the 70s. So it wasn't great offenses they played, but still, they did the things they needed to do in the clutch.
How much do you think it helps now, Sean, that they're running RPO at Penn State and defensively almost every game they're facing RPO?
Well, that's the way the college game is moving, and it's not just RPO, it's the number of receiver sets that you face, so they play a lot of two linebacker sets, whether that be nickel or their star package or something like that. So I think it helps in a sense because you prepare against it all August and then you get into your breakdowns, but yeah, that's the way college game is moving, so you're seeing a little bit of difference in terms of personnel going out on the field for Penn State.
Personnel-wise, Jay, what are a couple of areas that you're interested in early to see if they've adequately replaced people?
Well, I think pass rush. I mean, it does not. You look at the passing yards you give up. It does not matter how well you play in the secondary. If the quarterback's got 3.5 seconds to get the ball, someone's going to get open. I don't care how good you are in the secondary, or he's going to take off. So I think that's going to be a key. 40 sacks last year. A lot of those were not just by linebackers, but in blitz situations where they were able to create one-on-ones with the down guys because they were bringing extra people. Can they get there with 4 guys consistently? Because if you can do that, the entire game changes. I mean, as an offensive coordinator, if they can get you with 4 guys, you got to really adjust what you're doing.
Well, Penn State, of course, getting ready for preseason practice. They've got Live for Life coming up on Saturday and a big recruiting weekend as well, which Sean will touch on a little bit later. So we'll talk to him about that once we work our way through a couple of other issues on defense. We'll take a look at the front and the linebackers as we continue with Blue White Pulse after this. No question about that. But you know, it's something that was interesting last season, and I'm going to start with Jay on this, on today's passing games, which are, for the most part, pretty safe. Would you say that? Yeah. Most passing games today are pretty safe. Penn State went from the Iowa game, Troy Apke getting an interception, did not get another one until Brandon Bell in the Rose Bowl. How much of that is a product of how you play defense, but also now how, look, let's not turn it over and everything's safe?
Well, I think it's definitely people have gotten into with the run-pass option, with all the spread-out stuff that they're doing. You're creating a lot more space to throw the football into. You're making them people cover the entire field, and then the more man-to-man you play, you don't get a lot of tip balls, and now somebody else gets it. A lot of interceptions come off zones and guys tip it. So it's a combination of how you play defense, a combination of people just wanting to protect the football. There's no question.
Now we get to the secondary, Sean. In the last part of the spring, John Reed was not available, did not play in the blue-white game. When you look at the corners and then go to the safety spots, what do you see in the secondary right now?
Well, I think the corner spot, obviously losing John Reed hurts, no doubt about it, but Christian Campbell I think is capable of going in there and filling that void more so. He's longer, he's more athletic. He's a little bit more raw than John Reed. Nobody's got the skills that John Reed has on defense. So you're going in there filling it. You had 3 starters with Haley and Reed and Campbell. Now you got 2. So it's a place that could take a hit, but still you're going to see some change with Amani Oriware, Lamont Wade, guys like that getting in there. So it's going to be a place where guys need to step up, no doubt. Moving on to safety, Marcus Allen is obviously there, and you've got to fill a hole, which is larger than I think a lot of people realize with Malik Golden in there. That is going to be it's going to be a test for them.
Yeah, I think Apke, Nick Scott would be another guy. A lot of people would take a long, hard look at that safety spot. Now let's move to the linebacking spot. Let's talk about Bell. I think you brought up Bell, I think, in the previous segment, Sean. About as instinctive a linebacker, he's right up there with one of the better instinctive linebackers. Penn State's had so many of them, but he was an instinctive guy. He was not really a perfect field linebacker, except his instincts made up for it. How do you replace a guy like that?
That's tough because the guys that they have behind him don't have those instincts. He was a Ron Vander Linden guy, which obviously he knows his linebackers and his instincts. But Bell is a guy that just made so many plays when you needed it. You saw it in the Rose Bowl, and when he went out, it kind of changed things. So you can't replace him with one guy. Manny Bowen's a guy that is going to slide over and play the will this year. They kind of switched around with all the injuries they had last year. But if you can get those 4 guys, Manny Bowen, Jason Kabinda, Koa Farmer, and Brandon Smith, who was phenomenal last year at times, if you can get those guys to sort of be solid and not get hurt, obviously, knock on wood, not get hurt, but you've got a pretty solid core to start with and some young guys behind them that can come in and fill some reps.
I don't think it's any coincidence last year that defensively, especially, that when Jason Kabinda and Brandon Bell played the entire game, they did not lose a single game last year.
That's not a coincidence. When you know, good players make good coaches, great players make great coaches. One of the benefits I think the Penn State will reap, and I know we're not going to do a whole show on special teams, but linebackers are guys and secondary guys are guys that make up your special teams. And the fact that they played a lot of linebackers last year, those guys have game experience. They're going to be guys that played in games on defense, but they're also going to have game experience when they get it a punt return, kickoff return, those kind of things that are going to make differences in games. I mean, you look at that Ohio State game, that was a special teams win all around. I mean, defense played well, offense didn't play that well, but I think that's going to be a benefit this year that they'll reap. Yeah,
when you look at the linebacking spot, obviously Kabinda's back. Brandon Smith, who brings a real intelligence, a cerebral.
I think he's really underrated. I think when you looked at some of the plays he made, some key games. You know, he's a guy that you just love to coach.
As Jack Ham has said many times, and Jack might know 1 or 2 things about linebacker.
Did he play linebacker?
I think he may have at one point tried the spot, but first thing he said was, Steve, that guy knows how to play linebacker.
Yeah, and if you're in the right position, that's half the battle right there. Yeah. And Brandon Smith, while he may not have the physical characteristics of some of those other guys may not have the speed. Yeah. He's in the right position, and when you're there, you can make that play, and he did that a lot last year. Manny
Bowen probably has the best burst of any linebacker. Farmer the best speed. I felt Bowen in the spring started to show me he can play instinctively. If you can combine burst with instinct, now you've got something cooking.
Manny's always had those combinations, and it was something here, something there. I never really put it quite together, but if he can bring that together for this year, it can go a long way for this defense.
And I'm curious to see what Farmer does this year. I really am, because when he was on the field, he was a guy that speed-wise kind of jumped out at you from above. You go, oh, who's that? And with all the spread stuff they're going to face, and as much run game as a team like Ohio State's going to do out of the spread, having a guy that can, with that kind of speed, that can kind of play a little bit of both, it's kind of a hybrid. Those guys are valuable if you have them.
Right,
and he has the right instinct.
Right, and because he's played safety, he knows how to play the pass game, and that's, that allows him to stay out on the field every play as a two-way linebacker. And I'd said last year what Farmer needs to do is he needs to understand what is my strength and take advantage of it. And I felt last year he started to take advantage of his strengths and use that speed that he has. All right, coming up, we'll talk about the defensive end spot and up front for the Nittany Lions as we continue on Blue White Pulse after this. Season kept going, they kept attacking on defense, as you can see there. Let's take a look at this Penn State 2017 defense at a glance as to what they have back. The number of returning starters, the returning letterman, that's the big part right there, because, Sean, that's the next step in depth as they've been able to get the program back on track.
Yeah, roster building's been huge for the staff, and recruiting positions at a balance has been a big thing for them. You're not bringing in 5 or 6 defensive tackles in one year and then none the next year. So I think they've done a nice job balancing that out, and you're seeing that in the depth chart in the coming weeks.
Jay, Brent Pry goes into his second season now as a defensive coordinator. You know what it's like to ascend up the ranks. What does a second season mean to somebody who's in a coordinating position?
Well, you get your rhythm and you get the idea of how the game goes, and you get the feel for pitch count in terms of the game and how much time do you have, and you learn, hopefully you learn lessons when you're making mistakes, you learn what you're good at, and you learn your strengths, and you learn who you can lean on in certain situations. So I think there's definitely a big jump in how you perform your second year doing it as opposed to your first year, because every coach thinks, oh, when they suddenly become a coordinator, I'm calling plays, I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to do it that way, and they get in and it's live bullets. Yeah. And you go, oh man, this is going a lot faster than I thought it was going to go. But I think it slows down. I think, you look at the way he made adjustments in the second half of games last year. I think there's no question that he'll make a big adjustment from first year to second year.
Yeah,
as well.
He just looks to me like somebody who's got it. I mean, I think the way he handles the players, you see him on a practice field. You're right about the second half of games where he made really great adjustments along the way. I think he's got it to be a good coordinator.
Yeah, he made better adjustments than Bob Shoop, and that's saying something because Bob Shoop's a very good coordinator.
Yeah.
But Pry, he would just go out there and all of a sudden it'd be a different defense. You just flip it on, and there's so many little things that go into that. But the way that he was able to turn that around, I think he wasn't afraid to make those adjustments. Sometimes you get a little bit conservative, you get a little bit scared, especially when you're in your first year as a coordinator, but he was not afraid to make those adjustments. I think he's eventually going to be a head coach. He's got those qualities, as you mentioned, so I think he's definitely a good one, and Penn State wants to keep him as long as they can.
Yeah, I actually had another head coach that was at a practice and say to me, he said, when he talks, they all listen. And she specifically made that point to me, which I thought that was an interesting point for another coach to make. All right, I want to talk about the defensive front and get to that. Let's start on the edges here, because Penn State got very good production from Garrett Sickles and Evan Schwan last year. So how do you replace those guys, Sean?
I'm not sure that you do right away. You've got guys, Torrance Brown has played. He's started a few games. His prediction has been up and down, but the guys you look to, Sharif Miller and Ryan Buckholz, I think are the two key guys for them moving forward. Buckholz can play end and tackle. Sharif Miller had a great spring. I think he's going to be a breakout guy this year, probably going to lead them in sacks, in my opinion. So those are the guys that need to step up. And then you've got a couple redshirt freshmen who could step in there. Shane Simmons, Shaka Toney, who's drawn plenty of praise from James Franklin. So you've got guys to work in there. I think defensive end is probably one of the deepest positions on the roster, but they don't have that experience, and that'll have to come in the first couple of months or weeks of the season.
And, of course, as you know, Jay, that you can build defense like baseball. We talk about catcher, shortstop, second, and, of course, center field. Well, the same thing in defense and football. You build tackles, middle linebackers, safeties. So let's get to the tackle spots. What do you see there, especially maybe from a guy like Kevin Givens?
Well, I think, you know, they've got more size than they had 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It looks like. I mean, again, I'm not on the field to sit there and weigh them and height them and that kind of stuff. And I'm glad. But it seems like they have more size. And I think that's going to be the key is can they handle the run game? Because if you get people into one-dimensional things, now your defensive ends can tee off. They can get up the field. Your linebackers know what's happening. But I think that's going to be a key as to how they do in the middle with the size. And again, the thing about college football is you see a lot of different systems. And while a lot of teams have gone to spread, they're going to play Michigan at some point. Yep. And they're not interested in the spread. Nope. They're going to find how big you are and how tough you are and how you handle things north and south. And so, you know, it does change week to week. So you've got to be able to adjust. And I think that's going to be the real test for this defense is how they adjust to certain teams.
A lot of people have talked about, and justifiably so, about Ohio State's 4 defensive end package on second and obvious, third and obvious. Well, Penn State did that last year. How much has it helped that Givens, who had been an end in high school, can play tackle with his quickness, and Buck Holtz, what he can do?
Yeah, those guys just provide tremendous versatility. Givens was a high school linebacker originally, and Buck Holtz can play that end, and he's big enough to play tackle where he can play tackle against the run as well. So those guys, and in addition, you've got guys like Robert Windsor, whom I love. You know, I think he's a tremendous prospect for the future, but he's a big guy. He can stuff up the middle. You can replace him with a guy like Givens, a guy like Buck Holtz, and all of a sudden get to the passer. They can just swing those guys through there in that rotation. I think they'll be okay.
I haven't mentioned Lamont Wade yet. Where can he figure in?
A lot of places, because that's a talented kid right there. I mean, he can be all over the field. He can play that boundary corner. He can also play in the nickel, and I think that's probably where we're going to see his first shot is in the nickel. Just a guy that can find the football, can make plays. I think he was the takeaway king in the spring. Just a load of potential with that kid right there.
All right, coming up, we get to what we get excited about. It's called the D block. We'll talk about that after this. Well, you saw Saquon Barkley, Tommy Stevens, among others. They're out there handing out posters. I mean, publicity-wise, I mean, getting them out in the crowd, you know, regardless of whether you like the poster or not, that's a good thing just in terms of community, just to get them out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, the good thing about it is it gets people to meet these guys, see them without their helmets on, get a feel for them, get an understanding. And you know what? When you know somebody, it's a lot easier to root for them. And if it's a little rainy and a little cold, you go, you know what? I met them. They're great kids. I'm going to go to the game and support them, and I think that's big. The crowd
with Saquon Barkley the other day was incredible. I mean, he couldn't take 2 steps without somebody stepping in, wanting a selfie with him, wanting a picture, an autograph, or something. It was just a phenomenon. It was something special to watch.
You know, we've been talking for a long time about the future. Well, it turns out, quote, the future is now here because now they put themselves. You can just see right here what they've done recruiting-wise, and Sean, you've done a lot of breakdown on this. What do you see in that group when you've been able to break it down?
Well, I see a lot of balance. I mean, there's guys out there that can play right away. There's guys that are going to stash for 2 or 3 years and trying to make an impact. A guy that I look to, Tariq Castro-Fields, I think the sky's the limit. He's another one of those 6'1" corners, or a 4'4" guy. He can move. So I think he's a guy that could probably make an early impact, especially with the Reed injury. He can find his way on the field and do some things for your ball club. Another one, Yetur Gross-Matos, just a load of potential there. Probably not there right now, but you know he's 6'5", almost 6'6", about 245, and he looks like he's about 215 right now. So he's a kid that just a load of athletic potential, can come off the edge and be a pass rusher for you down the road.
Recruiting is, I mean, it's 365 days it seems, but another big weekend is coming up for them recruiting-wise. So what are some things that you're looking for out of the weekend?
Well, I think Penn State's probably about to get hot again. The Lash Bash Barbecue is their biggest weekend of the summer. They bring the kids in. They get them with the families, with the commits and their families and the coaches and staff. And it's just a big weekend, and a couple of commits will probably come from it. A guy I'm looking to, Asheem Young out of Philadelphia, is a safety. I think he's got a load of potential, even though he's not your prototypical 6', 6'1" guy. Just a heck of a football player for Imhotep Charter, which is one of the great programs in Philadelphia. So you've got probably 15 or 20 guys that could eventually be Penn State guys coming in over the next 3 2018, 2019, 2020 classes. So huge weekend for Penn State on the recruiting trail.
Jay, when you get to this part of the summer, give us a coach's perspective as to how you want to somehow button down things before you actually start a camp.
Well, this particular time you're on vacation usually. You know, you'll come back for recruiting stuff. and you want to spend those last couple days like, see you, honey, I'll see you January 3rd or 4th or whatever the case may be. But you know, you're always, even when you're on vacation, you're thinking, you know, hey, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. In the back of your mind, you're thinking about the home opener, the season opener for sure, but you're also thinking, what's Jim Harbaugh doing? What's Urban Meyer doing? What should I be thinking about? And you're looking at film and you're getting ahead. You steal some moments to look at some of the games down the road before you get back onto that season opener.
Want to have a little fun here, Sean?
Absolutely.
So, Jay, what about the NCAA dropping two-a-days?
This is men's football, correct? And that's not, I mean, but, you know, the idea that you can't have two-a-days in camp, and I understand what they're, you know, it comes down to lawyers. Everybody's got lawyers now, and they don't want to 10 years from now have concussion issues and say, well, why did you have two-a-days? You put kids at risk. And I get that. But, you know, the fundamentals of the game are learned in camp. You know, those are things that have to be done. The tackling has to be done. You know, there are some NFL guys that'll tell you the fundamentals of guys coming out, especially offensive linemen, are the worst they've seen in their careers. So a lot of that's being lost, and I think you run the risk of the game. You look at some of the games now, you're getting into 55, 52 games. No fans like that, but the fundamentals of tackling, the fundamentals of blocking, things that make football what it is, are being lost when you take two-a-days out.
But they haven't taken away the number of practices. That's why everybody's starting a little bit earlier.
As a player, I would have hated it because it would have meant I'm in camp that much longer.
Right.
I mean, when you're a player, camp is long enough without spreading it out, because now you're creating a lot of downtime where you're not doing football stuff because you're limited because they're in classes. And, you know, that's the other part, is the academic part of it, finishing up summer school.
Yeah, Penn State really had limited
two-a-days
days
temper
anyway.
That, by the way. I didn't go all out on the NCAA.
You didn't go all Trey Bauer
I'm a big fan
on
of the NCAA, no.
You didn't go all Trey Bauer.
No.
I mean, usually Trey's in that seat.
I can tell. Yeah.
And well, that's how Sean just fits right in with the group.
Absolutely.
It was great to have you here. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed it.
It was a pleasure.
We enjoyed having you. Great stuff, great information. Jay, always a pleasure. Appreciate it. All right, don't forget Blue White Tailgate. We're just a month away from that. Thanks for joining us on Blue White Pulse.